Good morning guys, we're back at it again with another video. So what I want to talk about today is clearing up some confusion and some common questions that I'm seeing on the videos here for the house build, as well as basically what our order of action is and what we're going to be doing next on the house. So right now, with the time of year, I planned this house build so that we would be completely watertight by the monsoon season. So that's really our major kind of critical timeline, I guess, kind of going forward, is just making sure that we are watertight. Typically towards the end of July is when our monsoon seasons start out here. So obviously it's really critical to get the roof finished and to get the doors and windows in, and then essentially at that point we're going to be watertight with the structure. With ICF, the rain can hit the foam and all that kind of stuff. It's really not that big of a deal. But once we get all the windows and doors in, and then there's also going to be some fiber cement siding that I'm going to be installing on the mechanical room. Once we get all that done, then the stucco guys can come in and finish off the entire house. On one of my last videos, I talked about how straight the roof is, and what I was referring to is like the trusses are straight. So instead of the trusses going up and down, creating an unflat roof, that's what I was talking about, is that the trusses were all really nice and straight. So if you were to take a level and shoot it down the trusses, it shouldn't really get caught up on the trusses. There is pitch to the roof. Of course, we've got to have some type of pitch to the roof. So the high side is about 14 inches higher than the low side. So it is still a relatively flat roof, but there is pitch on it because we will be collecting water off the roof here. So one other important detail that we want to talk about for making this home as energy efficient as we can, with obviously having a reasonable budget in mind, is how we're going to insulate the roof. Now, a lot of people have been curious about why we went with standard trusses as opposed to doing a SIP panel roof or doing a concrete roof or something like that. I just wanted to keep it kind of as simple and as standard as possible, especially with how high it is. With using the SIP panels, we would have had to have some interior beams that you would have seen like after the drywall was done, going through the center of the home, just for the span that we would have to go, and have some extra support. So I really didn't want to have any kind of like weird beams or anything like that going through it. And also, when you're doing a SIP panel roof, when they're sending it out to you, they want you to basically mark out where all the lights and all that kind of stuff is going to be going in your ceiling. And when I go in and wire a house, I don't like to basically already have all my light positions done or anything like that. I like to go in after the fact and kind of look and see where I want to position my can lights, any light fixtures, smoke detectors, anything like that. So using SIP panels, yeah, it could certainly work for some people, but with how I like to build, it just wasn't really going to work with me. And with doing a concrete roof, it's just like one of those things where it's like I just didn't really want to get into that type of project with this house. Just trying to keep things, simple and a little bit more standard, as opposed to going a completely alternative route. And there would have been a lot of extra bracing and other things that I would have had to purchase, and I just didn't really feel confident or comfortable doing a concrete roof. And the other thing is, with the roof truss design, the overhangs are really important for us. So I believe the 5-foot overhang that we have on the south facing wall is we're maxing out the cantilever effect on those TGIs. So I'm just not sure exactly how we'd be able to get that same type of overhang either with a SIP panel roof or with a concrete roof. So with making this roof as energy efficient as we can, even just using standard stick framing, what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 inches of rigid foam on top of the sheathing up there, right on top of the decking. So basically what that is going to prevent to happen is a lot of energy transfer going through those trusses and then that heat getting into the home. So that phenomenon is called thermal bridging, which happens obviously quite a bit in standard stick frame homes, because you're just going to get a lot of heat transfer coming through your studs. So the same thing would happen obviously with the roof, and with how hot it is and basically the lack of cloud coverage, we're going to get a lot of heat gain coming through that roof. So having that 2 inches of rigid foam right on top of the decking there is going to basically prevent and minimize the amount of thermal bridging coming through the trusses. And then between the trusses throughout the entire roof there, we'll be doing 8 inches of spray foam. And so doing rigid foam on your decking is kind of mimicking what we have with the ICF. Obviously not exactly, but to a certain extent it does, because on the entire perimeter of the house, the entire envelope of the house has 3 inches of foam insulation. So we're not going to get any thermal bridging through the wall through any studs or any wood studs or anything like that, just because there aren't any wood studs and we have that entire insulation going around the entire house. Now I follow guys like Matt Risinger and kind of see, you know, what he's been doing and how he insulates his home. Well, the rebuild that he's doing, that started out as a renovation and just tearing the entire thing down and doing it, I can totally understand why he'd want to do that. But he did a number of interesting insulation details on his rebuild project. And so just kind of following obviously the pros and the contractors that are doing this day in and day out, he did 4 inches of foam on his roof, and then I think 2 inches going around the entire perimeter of the building on the walls and stuff. So with doing that rigid foam on the roof, we're just going to try to minimize that thermal bridging as much as we can. A lot of people have been curious about what kind of roof that we're going to be doing. We're going to do a standing seam steel roof just like the tiny house. Same company that manufactured the tiny house roof will be doing the roof for this. So the company is called Mastercraft Metals. So the order of action of what we're going to be doing to get this roof finished off is I've got the 2-inch foam coming over the next couple days. We'll get that screwed down to the decking. Then there's also a piece of wood, a 2-inch perimeter piece that we're going to run all the way around so that it's going to be easier for us to attach our fascia steel, and any of our eave trim or gable trim will have a nice solid spot to screw into at the top of the roof, because we got that 2 inches of foam up there. Once we get all the foam done, I can actually put our underlayment right over top of that foam. So I went with the shark skin peel and stick stuff, which it is it's got a warranty, or basically you can leave it out in the elements, this type of underlayment, for up to a year. So obviously once we get it down and we get it stuck down to that roof is essentially almost watertight at that point. Obviously we still need to put our roof on, but if we get some early monsoon storms or anything like that, it's basically going to keep the majority of the water from coming inside the house and getting our roof sheathing wet and soaked. So once we have that done, we can work on our soffits. So I've got some fiber cement that we're going to be using for the soffits. They're going to look pretty badass. But the soffits is basically the underside of the overhangs. So wherever the overhang of the roof is sticking over the building, that is called the soffit there, just the underside of it. Then we want to work on our fascia trim. So the fascia board is the board that kind of runs around the perimeter of the roof there. It's it'll be about 18 inches thick, or 18 inches high. So we got to get our soffit material up, and then our fascia material up, and then we can start getting our roof steel up, and then we can finish off with our gable trims and our eave trims, and our drip trim, or our drip edge would obviously go in before that. But that's kind of the order of action for doing the roof. A lot of people still think that the foam is coming off the concrete. With ICF, the foam stays, it acts as insulation, and then in the foam there's actually plastic ties that you would have seen me install as we were doing the ICF, and those are our connection points for drywall and any interior fixtures and stuff like that we want to do. And for cabinetry, I'll be doing something a little bit different, but it gives you basically connection points all throughout the inside and the outside of the house. Because when the guys come to do their stucco, they're going to be shooting some nails right into those ties to get their chicken wire up so that they can apply the stucco to it. So one other thing for energy efficiency and for the roof is obviously the color of the roof. Now the roof trim, all the trim, the fascia trim, the drip edge, the gable, the eave trim and the gable trim, those are all going to be black. Now obviously we don't want a black roof. So we're going with a bit of a compromise, because obviously a black roof would look really cool, but it would be, there's actually stats on how much more energy is actually absorbed by black as opposed to white. So we're going with a very light gray roof. So it's not going to be pure white, but it's definitely not going to be black. It's just going to be kind of like an off-white, light gray color. So that's going to minimize the amount of heat absorption that we're going to be getting through the roof. Something else that a number of people were curious about is, since our roof is north facing, how is that going to work with solar panels? Something that I've mentioned in videos is that any grid-tied solar system is going to be going on the garage. So I already knew that beforehand, because the garage is positioned such that we'll easily be able to add solar panels to it, and then we'll do kind of a nice little grid-tied system there. So we'll be able to go fully off-grid with it, but we'll also be grid-tied as well. So right now the roof is most critical, as well as getting the windows and the doors in, but also in the meantime I can start working on other things inside the house. So when I was working as an electrician and I would go into a new home that we'd be wiring up, basically all the HVAC rough-in would be done, the plumbing rough-in would be done, and then we'd come in and start running all of our wires at that time. And that order of action is very important. So imagine if you're an HVAC guy and you're installing a main trunk line in a basement in a new home that you're roughing in. And right in the way of where you want to run your main trunk line, there's like a plumbing drain line. Now, trying to offset or get their trunk line to kind of offset and to go around like a plumbing pipe or an electrical wire is a huge pain in the ass. So that's why it's typically done in a certain order. So you have the biggest and the bulkiest things that are difficult to move that go in first. So all of your HVAC stuff, all of your ductwork goes in first. And then from there, the plumbers come in, they do all their rough-in, all their supply lines and all their drain lines. And then, since the electrical wires are really the easiest to maneuver and to get into tight spaces, that's why we come in last. So after all the HVAC is done and the plumbing rough-in is done and the electrical rough-in is done, you can do your low voltage stuff. So any type of automation, any kind of network cable, audio cable, security cable, or anything like that, it would be good to go in at that point, at that time. Once all that stuff is done, drywall, mud, tape, paint, finish cabinetry, finishing, all that kind of stuff. Obviously finish electrical, plumbing, all that kind of jazz at that point there. And then you basically almost got a house that will be pretty well completely finished at that point. It makes it sound really simple and like it'll just be easy and breezy. The way that I kind of explain things to people right now is that we're probably at least about halfway there. A lot of the bulk and the heavy lifting is kind of done with obviously constructing the walls and the framing and all that kind of jazz and all the concrete work. The rest of it, there's still a lot of work to be done. It just looks like, you know, you've got your shape, you've got your house shape finished, you're like, oh, you're almost done. There's still a lot of work to be done, and everyone's asking me when we plan on moving in. It'll probably be October, November, when it's like fully finished and livable at that point there, which will be awesome. So it just gives me a lot of time just to kind of focus on making sure that we're doing things right, as opposed to just kind of like getting through the process and not really taking the time and the effort to make sure that all the different aspects of this home is going to be done right. There's a lot of kind of interesting custom stuff that I'll have to do on the patio, things that are not really common or standard, but that's the way it is with certain home builds. And just basically having the time to take as much time as I want and not really feeling super stressed on finishing it within a certain period of time is definitely a really enjoyable part of doing this home, as opposed to thinking I've got to get this done in like a month or two. So a home build and a project like this is it's really like a marathon. So that's one thing that, you know, I learned through the tiny house and with doing other construction projects out here, is to just take my time with it. It'll happen, it'll get finished as it needs to get finished. And that's kind of my mentality and my mindset around it. It's very easy to get stressed about every single little detail kind of going forward and trying to figure everything out. One thing that really kind of helps me, and a lot of people are always curious about how I know how to do certain things, and a lot of it I learned through YouTube, and a lot of it I learned just from talking to people and asking questions. So just asking either the manufacturer of the product or asking certain contractors that I know who have experience with doing, you know, one certain aspect that I'm asking about. I just ask a lot of questions, and I try to do as much research as I can beforehand. And that's how it kind of seems like everything is going very smoothly, because everything is planned out in advance. I mean, our windows and doors have been ordered for like months. The doors have a lead time of 8 to 10 weeks. The windows have a lead time of basically about 5 weeks. So there's certain aspects of a build, especially if you're getting certain custom items, is that you need to have these things planned in advance to take into account the lead time. And obviously working through the construction trades, I learned a lot about the construction process, but I wouldn't say that that is like the entire basis of my knowledge. I know how to do electrical, but plumbing and an HVAC and a lot of these different things, obviously I don't know how to do because I was never trained in those. But what I've done with this house build is get everybody in place that can help me with it and can consult with me, as opposed to always hiring somebody to do the work. I'd rather have someone be able to teach me how to do things as opposed to them just doing it for me. That way I get to learn, I become more knowledgeable, and all in all, it's a great learning experience. Awesome guys, I hope that helps answer any questions that you have. We're just gonna keep plugging away, taking our time with it, and enjoying the process. Awesome, thanks so much for watching guys. We'll catch you on the next video. Talk to you soon. Peace.